In hindsight, I realized that cruising was not the best foot forward that you can put as an argument for the acceptance by heterosexual people of the gay lifestyle. It was never meant to be emblematic of anyone's lifestyle, but it did exist. And to me, it was a background for a murder mystery, period.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
All right, everybody. It's time for another one fucking hour. I'm Evan Husney, joined, of course, by my usual co-host to my left, Tom Fitzgerald. Tom, how was the birthday week?
It was kind of Walloompa, sometimes Salamini, and with a lot of moment.
Oh my god! And of course, to my right, Mr. Marcus Herring. Marcus,
what's up, guys? I'm broadcasting from a undisclosed location this week.
Kandahar, right?
Yeah, I can't disclose.
It's like every other week, a new spot for you. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in last week to Tom's Birthday Spectacular. One fucking hour on Jerry Lewis's Cracking Up. We did it. It happened. If you haven't watched it, definitely get in the archives and check that out. But this fucking hour, taking a hard turn here to William Friedkin's 1980 film, Cruising. All right, guys, I'm just going to get right to it and start that clock. You ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. All right, so just right off the top, I'm a huge fan of this movie. I really I had a blast watching it again and just soaking in the amazing details of this movie. And for those who haven't seen it, I mean, everybody should have seen it if they're watching our show. But Al Pacino plays a cop named Steve Burns. Guys, I don't see Pacino as a Steve, really. Do you in this?
Not so much.
Every time they're like, every time they're like, "Hey, Steve," it's just like, I don't know. He's more of like a Joe.
It'd be like Al Pacino as Josh.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's a good point. Every name works for him.
Steve does not work for Pacino. But anyway, he's sent undercover to solve a series of deaths in the gay leather bar scene of New York City's meatpacking district, as well as the areas in Central Park, one infamously called the Ramble, and the pier alongside the West Side Highway. You get to see Christopher Street, Greenwich Village. These are all the authentic locations that would be true to that community. But like all deep cover flicks, man, the experience of being undercover like that takes a massive toll on him. And Steve is getting closer to finding the killer, but we're left with a lot of ambiguity as to who the killer really is, and of course how much it's affecting Pacino, his own sense of identity. So, I mean, that's the film, man. But one thing I wanted to say, kicking it all off, is talking about maybe the most overlooked detail about Friedkin, about how amazing of a filmmaker he really is. Because when he's firing on all cylinders, he is like a method director. You know, bringing that heavy research into a film. Tom, you and I were talking about this. That his documentary background. I mean,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, I mean, he did get his start with documentaries, and I don't think it was just like a stepping stone career move. I think he really felt like really at home with making docs, and so it's interesting. And then and let's just say that his first big film, French Connection, is a very verite kind of thing. You know, it's just like no sets. You know, all just like it almost looks like stolen shots, without permits, I don't know. And that added this like super gritty edge, even beyond like a Midnight Cowboy or something. So that has a sheen of a doc quality. Now with The Exorcist, though, things took a turn. They became phantasmagorical. But
right,
yeah, he has a foot in docs, which might surprise people, or at least they might not have considered it that much.
I think he got a guy off of death row with one of his documentaries, if I remember correctly. Like he that's where he came from, and
Paul,
he also
Paul Crump, I think,
something like that. That's right. Right. And but one thing that he does in going into any movie is he immerses himself with the real characters, the experts, or the world that he's making a film about. You know, he's always striving for that authenticity. Like you said, French Connection has that through and throughout. I mean, you know, he's spent so much time immersing himself with the real New York cops to get everything right. And The Exorcist, of course, which we'll get to, has some very authentic scenes as well, outside of the more, you know, heightened, crazy, you know, horrific moments. Sure. And fucking To Live and Die in LA, man, shows audiences how to accurately counterfeit money, you know. So he has a habit of doing this, which is great. But what people may not realize about Cruising is that it has not only a link to The Exorcist, but it's rooted in a true story that it was inspired from. And this is something you guys both were hip to, knowing this before, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It chills me whenever I think of it.
Yeah.
The connection.
So
the incredible coincidence of it all.
It is such a crazy coincidence. This could be a movie in and of itself, but for those that don't know, in The Exorcist, there's a sequence where Reagan, the girl who is possessed,
Linda Blair,
Linda Blair. She's going under a series of medical exams, and Paul Bateson played the radiologist in the film. He's a non-actor. He's a real radiologist in real life. And that scene, of course, is lauded for its, you know, medical accuracy, you know, like, like at its time.
Hey, can I jump in?
Sure.
That's a very cinema verite moment too.
Exactly.
You know, like, and that chilled people. Not to totally sidetrack you, but just tiny little footnote is many people found that scene as upsetting as the rest of the film, the more phantasmic, you know, kind of stuff, because it's so down and dirty and just like slow, real time, like inserting the needle to extract, you know, this, you know, from the spine, the spinal tap, and I would agree that's a pretty unfun scene to watch.
Yeah,
in a film with lots of
movie,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so
Scene
people have pointed out,
yeah.
but it's flat as a pancake as far as a realistic depiction. You know. So anyway, so who's there?
Yeah,
An actual technician.
Exactly. So Friedkin, you know, for authenticity's sake, casts a real radiologist, you know, for that scene, right? Thinking nothing of it, but you know, his name is Paul Bateson. So years after Exorcist, he goes through some dark times. Okay, he has major struggles with alcoholism. He loses the job at the hospital or medical facility, flat broke, and he then becomes part of the leather bar scene. So he's part of that. And one night, he meets a variety film journalist named Addison Verrill at one of these clubs. They spend a night together. One thing leads to the next, where Paul just fucking, I don't know, in a moment of desperation to try and rob this guy, whacks him over the head with a frying pan and murders him for his $53 that he has or whatever. So super dark. And one thing leads to the next, where coincidentally, the victim's best friend was a Village Voice writer, okay, who would later, when Cruising came out, lead the, you know, charge against the film and lead all the protests against the movie, which is another bizarre connection.
Yeah.
But anyway, so friend of the victim, Village Voice, a journalist, he starts writing about the case, saying that this must have been a psychopath who hated gay people who committed this crime. One thing leads to the next. Paul contacts Village Voice and says, anonymously, like the Zodiac Killer or something, saying, I'm not a psychopath and I don't hate gay people. And that started some bizarre correspondence between the two. And then eventually, long story short, Paul gets caught with this murder, and he's able to get a 20 years plea bargain situation if he cops to these other murders that were happening in the gay community. So then William Friedkin reads this article and is like, oh my God, my fucking radiologist from The Exorcist is a killer.
Right.
I got to go. Well, of course, I got to go visit him in prison. So he goes to talk to him.
It's like you were saying, he's very thorough and, wants to hear, like, he doesn't want to just like hear about it. He wants to get to the source when he can.
Exactly. And so they discuss the case, and then even though he did get the plea bargain for the 20 years in prison, he told William Friedkin that he doesn't remember killing the other people, or that the police were trying to get him to take this fall for these other murders.
What he said was, Friedkin asked, did you kill those people? And he said, he's like, I remember the first one. That's what he said.
Wow.
Like, I remember. So that's That's what that was Friedkin's takeaway from it. I remember the first one, but yeah, it did sound like that he was like copping to some of the other murders, so the cops could just clear up the case, and
Right.
That happens all the time. Yeah,
And that's
just kind of like case closers,
well, that becomes a theme in the movie a little bit too, which we'll get to.
Absolutely. Well, can
so-
I just ask you actually? In Cruising, the film opens with the people dredging out body parts out of like the East River, in New York. Now, this guy, the actual killer, he did that too. He chopped up people's bodies too.
So the whole thing was that there was loose evidence connecting him to these other murders, right? But there were body parts that were found in the Hudson River, and some of them were in bags. This is what's really creepy. Some of them were in bags with labels that connected him to the facility he was working at while he acted in The Exorcist.
Oh boy! Oh, okay. So he did. Well, you said earlier
Forensic
that
Files, Q Forensic Files theme.
Right.
But no, he. You were saying that later on, after the period of his life, where it was in The Exorcist, then he went out and started killing people.
I'm not exactly sure on the timeline, and it's not.
It could have gone that far back, because that's actually, I've heard that before too, and that's actually what creeped me out. Like, all right, all in a day's work, Linda Blair, nice to meet you, and it's like, and then he goes cruising, and he's cutting people up. It's like, that would be too weird, because it's like the devil, evil, possession. Like
I know,
like some dummy might like all the bad vibes of The Exorcist like grew on this guy when he was experienced the shoot. Whatever. That'd be interesting to know though.
It's just fascinating. It's fascinating, the connections. So that's what kind of sparks an idea for this movie. Of course, there is a book source material as well. But one of the other things that's fascinating too is that one of a close friend to William Friedkin is a guy that I'm a big fan of. His name is Randy Jurgensen. Okay, and he's was a real New York City cop who played a huge part in French Connection behind the scenes. He also plays the lead detective in Cruising, by the way. So he's actually, again, casting a non-actor in that role. But anyway, so Randy Jurgensen is the guy who got Gene Hackman, Roy Scheider, like ready to play narcotics detectives. He showed them how to rough people up and to do those things. Randy was in the back of the car when they're shooting the chase scene illegally, so he could flash his badge if anything were to happen, right? So, but he's this guy who has all these crazy stories from being on the force, and one of them, which he, told Pacino later on when he was cast in the film, he was telling about how one time he had to go undercover to investigate two guys who were posing as cops and harassing gay men in these same communities, like Joe Spinell's character that's in Cruising. And there was also murders he was investigating too, but he went undercover, and he actually told Pacino and Friedkin that there were experiences where he was so lost in it that he even questioned his own sexuality at moments, so things got real for him. And so, that is just like, so combining those two real world things is how you get this movie.
Randy's the guy, correct me if I'm wrong, he's the guy who goes to the steak restaurant with Al Bundy in Cruising, right?
Yeah. And also, fun fact too, like Randy is the reason that Friedkin gets the best locations. Like, he's the reason he gets the courtroom scenes. He's the reason he gets the police stations, and he's the fucking reason in this movie he got to shoot in a real ass morgue, which I think was unprecedented at the time, because that morgue in the opening of the film, that's a real fucking morgue.
No, that does feel incredibly authentic and quite gory. It reminds me almost of like the opening scene of an Italian gut muncher. Like
100%.
Like, you know what I mean? Like New York City, gory, like
New York Ripper.
Like only like 3 minutes are actually in New York, and then they shoot established shots, and then it's shot in like Italian Italy.
The fact that they shot there harkens back to that what you're saying about documentary stuff too, and how he's like got that nose or that documentary background and shooting in the actual like leather bars too, right? Right.
But I don't know where we're going, but like
all right.
You're just making me think now. Well, I guess we could start talking about the controversy, the inherent controversy of Cruising, which is really just became all the press about the film. You were saying like he wanted to shoot, an everywhere reel.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, maybe help me out here. You're a Cruising guide.
Tour guide.
Anyway, tour guide. Yeah. So he, Friedkin really, of course, wanted to shoot in Christopher Street, which was like, the big community. It's where Stonewall is and everything on the West Village in New York. And what I had read is that, this was really the beginning of gay activism, heavy duty stuff. Like years after Stonewall, but like organized, you know what I mean? And then it got really heavy, during the 80s with AIDS. So, like, from what I understand, it's like Pacino and his apartment friend, they're getting a coffee or something in a cafe, and right in the Castro, right there in the cut. What the activists would do on the roofs, especially on the roofs, they would blow whistles. So if there was a scene outside of like a cafe or a dry cleaner or whatever on Christopher Street location, they couldn't shoot because it was a bombardment of horrible noise. And that sounds like that kind of cramped Friedkin style for authenticity. But he did get it, and I don't know the details, but from what I understand, it's almost like waiting for all the planes overhead when you're shooting near an airport. Like, let's time this. We got 3 minutes.
Sound,
like another plane's coming. So I think something. I don't know what happened. Maybe you can help me. Is like.
Let's back up a
they would
little
shoot
bit.
Maybe like 7 a.m. or something like that. Just the battle this film had to even get made.
Well, let's take a step back from that just real quick to get to that point of the controversy, because one of the things with this movie is that the same Village Voice journalist who was friends of the guy that the Exorcist radiologist killed, he got a hold of the leaked script. Is actually how it started.
Okay.
And he started reporting it in the Village Voice, saying that cruising promises to be the most oppressive, ugly, this is a quote, bigoted look at homosexuality ever presented on the screen. Friedkin is not only playing with a keg of dynamite, he's throwing a match to it. And this journalist, Bell, urged his readers to disrupt the production, saying, I implore readers, gay, straight, liberal, radical, atheist, communist, or whatever, to give Friedkin and his production a terrible time if you spot them in your neighborhood. So,
what were some other tactics besides the whistles?
Well, I mean, that was protests. Yeah, protests, disrupting any type of sound. I know that there was, like, if there was a neighboring apartment, they would blare music. Anything they could do to try and disrupt the film. But I think it's important to explain a little bit of the context in that, the backlash and the protests surrounding the film before it's even obviously made, it's just while it's being shot, is because obviously it was perceived to depict members of the gay community as monsters and killers, perpetrating further demonization. This is, the AIDS crisis epidemic is just, we're kind of right on the edge of it, going into that. And activists were really also protesting against gay people being portrayed as victims in films. We would see that, we'd also see similar heat for, Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs got similar backlash, on transphobia and things like that. So that was what was sort of happening.
And this is the year after Harvey Milk got killed too, right. And there were like riots in San Francisco. And I think like it's also like
the riots were sorry if I might just, it's even worse. Like they didn't riot when Harvey Milk was shot to death by another supervisor on the board. It was his verdict, the killer Dan White. It was like 3 months in jail.
Right.
I don't know if you guys.
Defense.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a genuine outrage. I mean, it wasn't the killing actually. It was just like, here you go. There's separate justice.
Right. Right. It's awful. But isn't it like true that there's like a flip side to it too, where Friedkin actually like he had worked with like members of the leather community, and like he claims to have like gone to those bars and been friends with them, and like he cast people as extras in the movie. Kind of at first was working with like the leather scene to kind of make this movie when the word started getting out about it, right? So
let's talk about that. Yeah, so he went to all these places, of course. What we were talking about, his knack for research and authenticity. He goes to these places. He wanted to shoot in the real clubs and wanted all the extras to be authentic. So he I think that Randy Jurgensen again, man, did a lot to make that happen. And so they I think rounded up like over 1,000 extras from the gay leather bar scene to be in that movie. And when you really see all those movies, all those scenes, he was telling them and directing them specifically, like, do what you normally do. We want to make this exactly as authentic as possible. And Al Pacino is just sort of weaving in and out of, exactly what that scene would be, So it's shot and then they just kind of wait for a magical moment to happen with Pacino, to kind of incorporate in the scene, which is really cool. And famously, there's tons and tons of extra material of that because they shot so much of it to get those scenes right. But
you get the right perfect moment,
right? And so yes, but they really had a lot of support from those direct communities, and it was just another subset of the gay community that was protesting the film. And you asked about tactics. Last thing I'll say, pamphlets were distributed, rallies were held, streets were blocked, bottles and bricks were thrown, demonstrators were roughed up, and arrests were made. So this was like a real intense
it was
thing.
heavy shit.
I think.
Can I say? And I think it's good that you mentioned San Francisco's intense reaction to the Harvey Milk killer, because it's not dissimilar. But if I might, I think because actually weirdly, I was researching something recently about the early power in the late 70s of gay activists, for lack of a better term. They really were getting organized, and one of the things they did was television. They actually really thought television was maybe the biggest battlefront. And what I mean is they wanted it not to be just campy and jokey gay characters, but like people who are real people, and so it's about representation. Yeah. And they had a lot of sway. They actually the studios amazingly did take notice, and there's like a Barney Miller. There's a Barney Miller with a gay couple, and they're treated like a person. They're not like just a sideshow. And I'll shut it up. It's just I think what's going on here, though, it's clear. Obviously, you guys, I'm sure, understand too. It's like representation. It's like, okay, let's have gay people in films too, but like, can you just pump the brakes on the really crazy extreme parts of our community over here that could easily be demonized because it looks like, well, shoot, one day they're just going to fucking kill each other, all these leather boys, because there's so much like violence play, and so I think that's what was offensive, not like but the leather boys were maybe more ambivalent about representation. It's like they were saying activists were saying it was a distortion. They're like, gay people, like, fisting and like, leather and punching each other in the face and stuff, and it's like, whoa, like there's, and actually I will defend, and then I'll shut up. I think the character of whatever his name is, the
Teddy.
apartment friend.
Yeah.
What is it?
Teddy.
What is it?
Teddy.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see where he is a grounded gay person, for lack of a better term, and he's like living a life of a regular human being, and he's not going crazy in this broad way where one can represent, where one could identify what gay people are like. He's just like you and me, So I thought that was actually pretty cool and balanced of Friedkin, for whatever it's worth. Because, and then, we know where that goes, by the way, and it makes it more painful, but we will. Yeah. But like,
Marcus
I think,
has got something though. So Marcus.
Yeah, so I'm done. Just it's representation.
Yeah, no, I think I just to piggyback on that, I do see that he tried to kind of balance it out a little bit by including Teddy, and then there's another guy, the guy who gets killed before he goes to the nudie booth, the 16mm porn theater. He that guy, like, has a normal kind of job, and he seems like a normal, regular, kind of everyday guy. So he does an attempt to balance it, and there is that sort of thing. Like, I don't know if it's actually all that good. It made for a lot of good movies, but there's a little bit of kink shaming with like leather and S&M and stuff. That like it always is. The serial killer in a lot of movies has like an S&M kind of thing, and there's always like a little bit of a insinuation that like the play can go too far or whatever. So
that's what I was saying. Yeah. Like it doesn't look like they're about to kill each other anyway. Like, if people are dumb and they don't know what's going on, they're just seeing it from the outside.
There's a panic. Yeah. An epidemic of that. Yeah.
A little bit of like hysteria in like S&M too, not just like in gay, but also like in, and that S&M can be like scary or like, harmful or whatever too. There's a little bit of that hysteria built in there too.
Sure.
I think what I was going to mention was you were talking about how there are all the attempts to kind of interrupt the production, and just how the numerous ways that I think you can see the ways that it's impacted. We'll get into some more of them down the road, but I think one of the major ways it's impacted is in the ADR in the movie, which like jumped out at me. The very first lines when I was in this rewatch, I was like, gosh, it this movie always does sound really weird, and it's because all the additional, a lot of the times, additional dialogue is recorded later, and I was like, what's going on here? This isn't like a Italian co-production or something.
And it might be because there's like 100 whistles.
Yeah, exactly.
Blowing.
Exactly. Yeah, because the whistles outside, so they had to re-record the dialogue.
Right. And it's disorienting.
It is disorienting, but it adds to the kind of creepy effect of the movie, I think.
Absolutely.
And
more on that later.
When the cops are in the car and Joe Spinell is talking, he's so close in the mic, it feels the mic's like really hot, and you can feel like it just feels like someone almost like whispering in your ear or something.
We have a lot of more of that later.
So. Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting how like that kind of accidental discovery led to like an additional creepy factor for the movie.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I got something on the ADR. An ADR theory I want to throw on you guys.
Did we show a clip?
Oh my God, we haven't shown a clip. Let's just put a bow on the controversy of the film, if I may. Just talk a little bit about this movie. Has been sort of reevaluated since that time. There are people, critics, and viewers, fans of this movie, that do feel that the depiction of gay people in the film is kind of remarkably sympathetic for its time period. Especially for a Hollywood movie.
Time.
I mean, you really look at a movie like Partners that comes out 2 years later, with Ryan O'Neal.
Boy.
Yeah, exactly. And
Sure.
really the only negative light that this movie really shines on any community is the police. Was very critical of the police in the way it's depicted in this film. I mean, Joe Spinell and his partner, you just mentioned how they, he kind of, he's forcing, the two trans women into the patrol car and threatens them if they don't perform sexual acts. I mean, that's horrible. When they have the guy they think is the killer, they bring him in and say, "Hey, jack off in front of us, and we're gonna make sure see if your scrotum floats," and all. It's like just horrible stuff. And but what really strikes me is that throughout this film, like the people in the nightclub scene are the victims of this movie. Whether it is through the killer's knife or the harassment of the cops, like that's pretty level in the way it's depicted. And there's a great line that Pacino says in the film when he's talking to the captain, and he says, very cold. He just says, "I didn't come on this job to shit on, some innocent gay guy, man." And it's just like, that's a great, like, that's great that that's in there, even for the time period and what we're talking about. You mentioned Teddy. Teddy as a character is an amazingly grounded aspect to the whole thing. But what I think is this movie really does portray the leather bar community as an innocent community for the most part, which I think is so conversed from what they thought, this movie
being
was
preyed upon. Well,
being preyed
it's
upon.
like the film is not a bunch of leather bar guys who after the bar go out and like stab people in the stomach. That's not what the plot is,
Right. At the same time, it's complex because it absolutely does exploit them for the shock of like mainstream audience too. You know what I mean? Like it is a double-edged sword because it's definitely exploitation too. But
I don't know. Is it?
It's complex. I think.
No,
I don't know. Is it?
I would agree with. I agree with Marcus. I think it's a hot, sexy, visually stimulating environment.
Yeah.
He's right. It's like they're not reading in the library. It's like it's a grabby subject and environment.
I would push back only in saying that I don't think it's
exploitation.
It's not.
Exactly.
It's not exploitation because that is,
but it is
what you would see. I mean, it's lurid, but that's accurate to what is happening. Like there's nothing is.
Well, but the choice he made to focus on it, as a visual feast, and it's a gawky kind of thing. That's Marcus. What did you say? It's like it's like a voyeuristic appeal of like middle America. This film's playing like in a strip mall in Peoria, and it has an inherent exotica.
There's definitely some othering.
Otherness. And it's lingering. It's not just like, well, they're all here. It's just like there's long montages. I don't think it's a problem. It's just
the only thing I will say is that in the hands of any other director at that time, especially, it would have been astronomically worse. I think this is a very objective treatment of this material. Personally, I don't think it. I actually don't think it crosses the line to being overly exploitive. That's just my personal opinion on the.
I got you.
To
I think
your
it's
point
close.
to your point about another director, Friedkin does tell the story numerous times that
Yeah,
that
Spielberg.
it was originally offered to Spielberg. The script.
That's the movie I want to see. Holy
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but the last thing I'll say about the controversy with Friedkin is that he does, nowadays when he talks about it, he does fully acknowledge that cruising coming out at this time, at this sensitive time for that community was not it was not good timing, and he does look back on that as that because they were already demonized, and so he doesn't fault anyone for the reservation.
He understands the reaction.
Of course, yeah, 100%.
Well, can I say though, I think maybe to put a button on all this part of our convo is I think it's the case where it's like, God, I hate, Life of Brian or something, like, have you seen it? No, I didn't see Life of Brian. I'm protesting, it's like, or, Last Temptation of Christ. I hate this movie. No way. And it's like, did you see it? No. Everyone always says, I didn't actually see it. Why would I see that filth? And I think that it's one of those things where like, it's in a context of the 70s. Because one thing that happened in the 70s, all the floodgates opened up in graphic representations of everything in the 70s, right? And it included gay culture, but invariably, gay people saw themselves on screen as psycho killers. And I think Freebie and the Bean from 1974, need to rewatch it. It's been years, but I think it's really gross. It's just not good. It's like gay people, like they're crazy and they just want to kill and kill, and fuck kids and stuff. It's like, whoa, you know what I mean? And Vanishing Point had like, it's gay people. Oh, right. Of course they have guns and they're robbing people. So I think that they're just expecting, they just need to hear. There's a Hollywood film by the Exorcist guy, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's set in leather bars. And it's set in leather bars. So Exorcist guy is bringing a camera to the leather bars in our community. And it's like, oh, Christ. Like, they just made an assumption. Right. And why shouldn't they? Because of the precedent. Right. Because by the way, they're protesting movie that's being filmed. Right. So they haven't, of course they couldn't have seen Cruising.
Nobody's at fault.
Even the aftermath, I think, the fact that, because I don't think the movie did very well, and I think the controversy didn't just end upon its release. I don't think either. It's only been kind of reassessed, like in the last 20 years or so, right? But I think the fact that it's kind of confusing and ambiguous as a film probably didn't help either, because you're not quite sure what the take. I could see audiences going, not quite sure what he's trying to say, which is like something I really like about the movie, but I could see people going to that and being like, and feeling like, not quite sure, because it doesn't hold your hand, tell you what it all means, or it might mean nothing too, actually, but
that could dovetail into some of Tom's issues with Cruising, maybe.
Well, we spent 30 minutes talking about the controversy. Let's talk about the movie,
film.
For a while. Yeah.
Let's just talk about the movie just for a little bit, and then we'll get to that stuff. Do you guys want to just talk, for me, let's talk about some of the things I love about this movie, just broadly.
Right.
I love the fucking cold pacing of this movie. I love that. I love the restrained performances of the movie. I think that works really well. The flatness of that. The camera technique of the movie in general, I'm just listing off a couple things. I really love how flat it seems to, but also that monochromatic look, the blues and how they play against the blacks, is just fucking great, man. And
it's
just
beautiful film.
Yeah, it's very stripped down, and again, I say in another director's hands, just imagine what they would have done in terms of exploitation with this material.
It's another one of those sweet time capsules of New York during that really
what's
perfect era.
What's the saying? The saying is eventually every film becomes a documentary.
Yeah, right.
And this French one said that. Because that actually, and it is. You mentioned AIDS. Like, AIDS did not exist on the consciousness of people in 1979 when they shot it. But of course it put a chapter end to the period that you see in Cruising, a quick one, Right. So, and you really only see that in gay porn, actually, that's it. That's, so not even a Hollywood film, because even if they had a gay character, in an exploitation film, they would never go to the bars. It's no way. Yeah. But I love the editing. I think it's really cool during the murder scenes. Some of the murder scenes are some of the best, like horror movie scenes, for lack of a better term.
Agreed.
It's like it takes everyone to school. Like I know this sounds dumb, but like slasher films or something like that. And it even
Should we
makes
watch one?
like sure, yeah, the good idea. Let's get to it.
I picked the third one mostly because this is the scene where the killer kills the guy in the 60 millimeter peep show. This one I love because, again, you said the editing is amazing, the subliminal images that are in there, but also that it shows 60 millimeter footage of the first murder for a second, which is also really tripped out.
It's killer strobic editing. And, we should mention that it's not even a rumor, but it did happen in the theatrical, and I think the first VHS and cable airings. He did insert single frame hardcore gay porn. For a second, and then somebody slapped his wrist, and said, "What are you doing?" Like when they saw it, like maybe the DVD doesn't have it or something.
I always loved that about him doing subliminal stuff, like in The Exorcist.
Like the flashing face in The Exorcist. Amen. Yeah.
Let's check it out.
Yes, this is the one I thought of too. It's a great example.
That's from the first murder.
Yeah. Something that's weird, like that guy. Apparently, that guy is the actor that walks into the booth too. The first guy is murdered.
Hang on to that for a minute.
Bloody screen.
You made me do that.
Oh man, and the creepy.
What
ADR.
Is that?
Yeah.
What is? And I gotta say, just very briefly, that's almost the most 70s moment ever in that 70s film, because it's a really graphic depiction of a very, very intense moment, and he goes to the hilt. Like, I guess all I'm saying is no one went back to that vibe ever.
Right.
Like that only could have happened in the 70s, shot in 79. Like it's a grand, grotesque, upsetting. You can't camp that up. You can't look at that and go like, Friday the 13th, beheading or whatever. That's just like grim and shocking, but it's also has these great cinematic flourishes only in the 70s.
We have a lot to get to, so let's just look at a couple other scenes real fast, and then I do want to talk about the ending. Let's
I
just
didn't
talk.
get to talk about the things I like either, by the way.
Oh, okay, please do.
So, well, two things that really stand out. The music is so cool in this movie. Like, almost, I love the music and the soundtrack and that story as much as the movie. That he originally wanted Friedkin went to the. I noticed this early on when I first saw the movie. I was like looking at the gay bar footage and thinking like that is not the kind of music they listen to because it's so kind of scary. The music in the bars is very scary and menacing.
Like scary biker.
And I knew right away.
Bar.
I was like that. I knew they were listening to like disco and stuff that was more upbeat. So I always clocked that was intentional to get rid of the happy music and get into sort of menacing music. And I think he originally wanted to get the Germs to score the whole thing, and they recorded a whole album of material for it. And I guess I'd forgotten this, but Tom, like you pointed out, there is a Germs song like left in their Lion's Share. And
song Lion's Share is in there, yeah. Which is during
yeah. I guess like you said, Darby Crash, what we were talking just before this, that he must have died like right after this movie came out, like within a couple months of the movie.
Oh yeah.
But the rest of the soundtrack that's on there too is just so menacing and scary. The Mutiny Lump, that song is so scary and like dark, scary disco music.
Dark disco, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what was big? You were saying disco, but it wasn't always in those kind of scenes. I mean, those kinds of environments at the time. It wasn't happy disco. It wasn't like you make me feel. It was more like what the totemic song and more importantly the sound of a bar like that would be I Feel Love. Like it's very marauder. Mm-hmm. It's very poppers and getting like oscillating or arpeggiating synthesizer. Right. And that was the big thing. But I can tell you it wasn't the Germs.
Yeah.
He did take artistic license with that.
Cool idea though.
And then another note in the sound effects in this movie are really cool too. And like, I think that's another thing that we always bring up on the podcast, that like we love movies that treat the sound as like a creative tool too. And I saw an interview, Friedkin's talking about it, saying that, I looked at the soundtrack as just as important as the photography, and it needs to do more than just be the sound. But you really see that in this movie. Like there's like a part where 2 songs are playing at once, like, which is amazing. And there's another part where Pacino's like, his wife's like, or girlfriend's like going down on him and something, and it starts playing the music from the leather bar like in his head, so you know what he's thinking about. It's
great.
Nice one. But just to go,
and then
with,
just the sound of like the leather too, it's like you hear all the crunchy leather and stuff, and there's a lot going on with the sound. It's very cool.
He went ham on the soundtrack of The Exorcist as well. So if I can just interject almost just a statement and then we'll move on, is I'm totally co-signing with you, Marcus, on that. One thing, and also with you were saying like he's really into research, Evan. Mm-hmm. The one I really like about him is he makes good choices.
Oh yeah.
And choices really matter to him. And I'll just give you the one example where Lalo Schifrin submitted the soundtrack to The Exorcist, and he like threw it across the room. He said, "It sounds like fucking marimba music," And then no, but listen to this. No, check this out though. This is the guy. The guy has a great has great eyes and ears.
Oh yeah.
So to speak to what you're thinking about the soundtrack, Tubular Bells, the theme of The Exorcist, Warner Brothers gave him and said like, "Oh, here's all our new releases because you've seen Lost. Can we pick a fucking score to The Exorcist now?" And he just had like a stack from Warner Brothers of new releases, and he went, no, extra no, absolutely not, what? And then, boom, Tubular Bells album had just come out, and he went, yes. And it doesn't seem, no one would have suggested Tubular Bells to him, but God, it's perfect. And it is horror, Yeah. So just to say that he makes such great choices, and it's on exhibit again. I'm done in Chris.
Yeah. Let's just because I really want to talk about it, make sure we give it a little bit of time. I do want to talk about the ambiguity of the film at the end. So maybe we'll just get into this now, and then we'll get all the rest of it in afterwards. Let's start by talking about, so once in the film, towards the end, when you think Al Pacino has solved the crime, murderer is caught, there's this really sad coda, which I just want to tee up and play. It's a really upsetting.
Watching it.
Yeah, it's a really upsetting moment here where he goes into Paul Sorvino's character, basically, working for the police, goes in to find Teddy, the innocent neighbor to Al Pacino in this movie, has also been killed now, even after they've caught the supposed killer, which is disorienting.
The quote-unquote killer is in jail, and we see this really just nice guy. It's just such a bad vibe. Again, in the 70s.
Totally. And one thing I heard about Paul Sorvino with this role too is Friedkin just directed him and said, you need to find the pit of sadness in your character in every shot you're in. And he really does. He has the look of sadness like nobody else. He nails it in this movie.
Hang dog.
But so let's just talk about this, because this is, Marcus, you almost buried my lead. So here it is. So with Teddy's death, okay, one of the things that's not really discuss at all about this movie, which I think is unbelievably fucking cool. And so a lot of people talk about the ending being disorienting. I don't get it. What's going on? Blah, 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 blah. The 3 main murder scenes in the film, right? They all mixed up the casting for those scenes, okay? So sometimes you have the person who's a victim in one scene actually in the other murder scene is playing the killer, and vice versa. They interchanged the casting of all things. So it's a super trippy, fucked up idea. But it also really works kind of thematically for the movie, because if this movie is just, all just about, who's the killer? It's kind of like not really that's just very very basic. So it's more about thematically, obviously this movie has a lot of themes of identity. I think that's what the biggest theme of this whole movie is. And you see it with Pacino at the end of the movie when, he's, where is he at with this, right? But one of the things that's totally amazing is that the killer's voice, so it's, even though it's played by 3 different people in the 3 different murder scenes, all the killer's voice, his actual voice has been overdubbed by somebody else who's not on screen, which is total nightmare vibes. But get this, the actor who voiced the killer is actually the actor that played Stewart, who is the guy that gets apprehended for these crimes at the end. It's actually his dad is the guy who plays the voice
You know
of the
what you
killer
have to do.
in the
Really?
movie, which is the creepiest voice ever. But it's on brand because
Yes.
Stewart's main motive for killing is the repression and disapproval of his father.
Sure.
But to me, it's like it's so confusing in the end because it's supposed to be confusing, and it's like put on your Sledgehammer, goggles here for a minute. In the idea that the killer in this movie is, it's like this ephemeral, interchangeable killer, which is more darker and more mysterious to me, like a shape-shifting, like omnipotent evil and a more indescribable force.
Yeah. It's like a dark cloud has landed on top of Christopher Street.
I always thought it was more of when the very first time I watched it and was so confused, and I loved it. I loved how confused I was, honestly. I felt like it was like Mulholland Drive or something, or I was just like, I didn't get it. Or I thought it was sort of like a more of a demonic possession or like supernatural type thing, like that one guy is passing it to the next guy, which is weirdly has some sort of like, I mean, like you said, AIDS wasn't a thing yet.
I was going to say.
Maybe like that was, but then it is kind of mixed up too. It's not just as simple as like one guy passing it to the next guy, because like one of the guys that's dead comes back for a second or something, like you see. And it's very confusing. But there's that part where like there's two things backing that up. When they first ask the guys like, "Where are you from?" The very first killer gets asked, "Where are you from?" And he says, "I'm from Mars," or something like that. And then later on in Stewart's diary or his letter to his dad, it says something about like, "In the park, I saw a black shape in the tree. It was dripping down like tar with a glowing red." Glowing red center, Father. I wanted to show it to you, And it's like, so there's some sort of weird, like almost like a Venom, Spider-Man, Carnage kind of like, possession type thing going on. I don't know. It's not explicit though, so it's just kind of like in your imagination.
Right. To me, it's much more symbolic, where the theme is explored in that way. What's happening in this community more so than who done it, and you talked about the possession, how it's passed around to others. I mean, it is kind of in that ending moment, that really creepy ending moment with Al Pacino shaving, where he then stares into the camera lens, and then it cuts to Karen Allen putting on the clothes the killer had on, I'm pretty sure, in the first kill scene,
Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows how much of this is intentional, and, who knows how much of this is just like, the net result of this. But like, to me, it kind of goes back to the source material. You talk about that guy behind bars who told Friedkin, he's like, they tried to pin all this shit on me, and it's like, it is this kind of like Lynchian, almost, I don't know, immaterial, omnipotent evil that's kind of just in this, like you said, like
it's abstracted.
It's abstracted.
Yeah.
Which is so unlike him in a way. I mean, The Exorcist is fantastical, obviously, because of just the topic, but he doesn't usually do that. Like even in The Exorcist, it's grounded. It makes sense. It's happening, at that place and those priests, But this is him doing something pretty different that I don't think he would really return to it.
Yeah. I always had the feeling that it was kind of like, it must be accidental, and I think he might have backed into that, because he says something like, 2001 was like one of the greatest. He says,
they all say that.
Quote where he says like that. What's that?
Wait, what?
They all say that about 2001, kind of.
He says like, Friedkin says like 2001 is one of the greatest movies of all time, and it's as ambiguous as fuck,
Yeah.
But I do think, I kind of do have that. My gut is that like maybe the film got so interrupted. They got, when they're shooting it, he got a little spooked. He had to cut a bunch of stuff out.
Interesting.
And
Marcus,
they just sort of like, I think maybe he sort of ended up having to back into it being ambiguous and seeing like, maybe it'll work.
Marcus, I agree with you. I think there's at least a portion of that component that landed in the final product. That's my theory. It feels like a director sort of painting themselves in the corner, because obviously whatever source material he diverted from that majorly, I'm sure, probably during the shoot. I feel like the film got away from him a little bit. I do have some criticisms, and I think I'll just keep it quick, but I think it's related to what you're saying, Marcus. It's not all of it, but I think it's a bit of a troubled film, not just the shoot, but Friedkin's articulation, what he's trying to say, because I think there's no center to the film for me. And I think that I kind of I wobble a little bit in my attention because I'm not. It's not a building and not a whodunit thing. I don't care about that. But I do. It strays a bit, and I stray a bit. But I think the critical problem is I'm not really always liking Pacino's performance, and I feel that the film should have been the center of the film. Should have been the character that Pacino's portraying. And I look in his eyes. So we've all seen him act many times. He looks like he's kind of lost, and it looks like he doesn't really know what the center of the film is or his character. And I think he underperforms, not in this Michael Corleone way that he does masterfully in like Godfather 2, but he actually just looks a little bit like a lost actor, and that makes me kind of lose my grounding in my engagement in the film.
So I felt that way too before rewatching it, and I do think revisiting the movie, like I do appreciate his performance more and more every time I do see it, because I do think that there is an innocence with him going into this movie where he is lost. And I do think the lostness
You mean the
works.
actor, Al Pacino?
I do, yeah. I think that there's a lostness in his performance that really works. Like, we should show the scene where he's, popping off on poppers, which I think is very awkward. Like, here, let's just look at it really quick. So
that's campy. Like, I've played that for people, and it just makes them crack up.
Of course.
It's funny, as soon as he huffs, the lights come on. I thought that was like an intentional moment,
Oh my God, I don't know, man.
Well, it's the very first time the rag goes in his mouth. The lights come on.
Yeah. So, here's my take on this.
Yeah.
Is it ether or is it poppers or is it ether?
I think it's poppers. I think ether would just pass you out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Poppers probably.
My whole thing is that he's very awkward, in that first big chunk of the movie, right? Like, he's a fish out of water. He doesn't quite know how to get it. The character. But I do think it works in the performance. I think I'm sensing it more in the performance. And then I think as he starts to gain more confidence, and maybe this was playing into the method of it all, because he is a method actor, is like when he's getting more comfortable with it. That last scene where he's cruising in Central Park and gets the killer, off to the side, and is like, okay, so what are we doing? Lips and hips here? What are we doing? And he's really much more, confident. Like, I got to be somewhere. Are we going to do this? So what?
He's got on a roll. But I think, what I think? But my theory, I understand the ramp up of a method actor, but it feels to me, because that's a good call. I remember that scene where it's like, whoa, Pacino lights up like a light bulb right here. And I think for me, it's like he has a handle on the material there, where he's feeling more lost.
I think his character is too, though. Like, I really do.
Yeah, I don't know.
I only disagree because I do think, like, that scene where after the interrogation scene, where he's being, interrogated, and that, when the 6'5" black guy walks in.
We have to show that.
We will show it. But the one thing I will say about that is, after that scene, when he has that very meaningful dialogue sequence with Paul Sorvino, and he's just like, man, like, I didn't get this job, just to rag on some innocent gay guy. I just think his delivery, in Restrained as it is in this movie, I think works. I really do. He does have a sense of being a fish out of water, and it's awkward. It's very awkward. It's awkward for us to watch Al Pacino doing this. But I think if you can dissociate yourself from what you think of Pacino, I think it does kind of work. Because I know Friedkin wanted Richard Gere, which I don't think would have worked at fucking all, because he's too much of a fucking pretty boy, and it just wouldn't have worked. There's no way.
I beg to differ, actually.
I don't think it would have worked.
Well, okay, I could see him going right from, looking for Mr. Goodbar into this film, and he has a lot of appeal. Because one of the things that throws me off about Pacino is he doesn't look very hunky and hot. Like, he looks like, not just that he's short, like Pacino's a good-looking guy, of course, but like he looks
not American Gigolo.
I don't think that would work.
But it's not that film. I think it. I know what you're saying too, but I think it would work better for me because he would blend in better. There's something. It's something about the way Pacino carries.
Pacino's got the street. He's got like the street hardness in him. that I think
Yeah,
is there.
it's not going over for me. I'm left wanting by that performance. So that's me. Whatever.
Friedkin does seem to kind of shit on his performance a little bit too these days.
He does. Yeah.
No, he's come
That's
around.
the legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a long time. So anyway, we've got some clips. Maybe let's have a little fun.
Okay.
And there's a classic scene.
Everybody's favorite scene.
That's blown all of our minds when we've seen this film, and as it should. And it actually is about a mind being blown. So let's maybe explain it on the other side.
I put them both together. I put them both together because it has a good intro. Yeah.
Right.
His room with him. That's bullshit. Is that right?
I told you it was my room. That's all I'm gonna tell you.
This was my introduction to this film.
Me too.
WTF.
What the hell was that?
And then here's the second one.
Right.
Who is that guy?
Classic.
Who indeed?
Classic out of context.
Who wants to explain why that scene exists?
Well, it exists again. Going back to my man Randy Jurgensen talked about how this was a real tactic that was employed by cops, that they during certain interrogations they would have something as wild as that happen in an interrogation, so a perpetrator would lose credibility when trying to complain about detectives' behavior, No,
I'm telling you, he was huge and he was naked, he had a jockstrap and a cowboy hat. What the hell? What's the problem? That happened. Like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like maybe they had like a clown, with no pants,
right?
Punching the shit out of somebody.
It's insane.
It's brilliant. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. Like, it is sourced by a cop, because you can't make that up as a screenwriter, and you can't imagine it happening, and you wouldn't have known about it. It's an inside detail, and that's great.
Let me hit you with the things that I bump up with on cruising. It's a short list. Yeah. But to me, I think Karen Arthur's character is a big missed opportunity.
Karen Allen.
Sorry, Karen Allen. Karen Arthur, Rape of Richard Beck director. Karen Allen is she's awesome, but I think her character is a big missed opportunity because she's really nothing in this movie, absolute stone cold nothing in this movie. And she coulda, woulda, shoulda, but maybe, in terms of, looking at the deep cover aspect of Pacino's character as it's having the effect on him, maybe utilizing her character more in a way to bring that through a little bit, where maybe I could almost see pulling something out of Straight Time, like a more of a Teresa Russell and Dustin Hoffman type moment, or more moments between them that could have articulated that a little further. But I think that could
classic underwritten female character.
Of course, yeah. I think that's kind of my main, real gripe with the film. It's something that just sticks out to me as kind of superfluous. The
only female in the whole film, and she's pretty flimsy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just underwritten. And it happened. There's plenty of scenes, though. That's the thing. And that's when I just lose focus sometimes. Like the film, I get out of the film's rhythm, and it should have momentum. And all I'm saying is this could have been an out of the park classic for, the kid here, just my personal subjective opinion, but it's not, it's not like in one of his best. It has more flaws than a lot of classics, but it could have been a real classic. It has a lot of components for it. I could see Pacino going. I would not mind seeing someone else cast in the lead.
Everybody loves the leather scenes, and they're like the great focal point of the movie. They're awesome, amazing, but it is sort of unusual that you go back to that same bar 4 or 5 times in the movie, and that is pretty unusual for a film to spend that much time in one location.
Well, something that's very akin to the 6'5" black man slapping sequence in real life is, William Friedkin was known for pulling a lot of weird, pulling things over on MPAA people, or just different hacks to get his movies made, and one of them is that he
was a real prick.
He did, and if we do French Connection, if we do that for the show, there's a million of those examples of the different things he did in order to get his way. But one thing with this film is he knew the MPAA was going to be a problem, so he actually shot. He had his first cut of his of Cruising had 40 more minutes of the leather bar stuff in there that he knew that he had no intention of actually keeping in, because he just gave them, the bait and switch of, okay, just tell me to cut all this stuff and we're good, and then he gets the film that he wanted.
Classic movie.
It's a classic trick, yeah.
Classic, great thing there. But I don't know. I was just gonna say that. What were we talking about? We only got 2 minutes left. But I don't know. Anything else you guys want to get?
You articulated your dings against the film. Marcus, do you have a ding or two? Okay.
Sorry. Do you?
Go ahead, Evan. Take it away. I've dinged it a little bit. So
okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. The only thing I was just gonna say is, like, one. I think the movie to me is really about, like, identity, and we did talk about that with Al Pacino's character and the passing of the clothes. And I do think you talked about the leather bar and going back into it in this movie. I kind of do think that it is the safe zone of this movie in some weird way, and I think they were in the community, because it's a place that people could drop out of their square life and and play with their identities, become something else.
It's
dress
play.
up as a cop.
Yeah,
dress up as a cop, and and for Al's character, Steve, it's something for him where his eyes really open up and he really is seeing that, oh my God, this is a whole other realm of existence, and he can never go back. And I think it's similar to the themes of another great film we should cover on this channel, Deep Cover. I think is also that. But
on the list, yeah.
But I think that the film, for me, what knocks it out of the park is that intangible fear that is haunting this whole film. There's an indescribable character that enters in one of the leather bars, is seen exiting one of the leather bars, who's nobody we know, and then walks back into it at the end, and that's kind of a weird mystery in and of itself.
Yeah.
So I just love that sort of high concept thing with this film, and that to me is what kind of transcends it. Like, I don't really mind that there are some rough edges to this movie, because I
love the experience, the whole experience of it. I wish I could watch it again for the first time, because I loved how disoriented I felt the first time afterwards, and just be like, "What was that?" I think that's
what more do you want?
Special. It's special. It's a special experience as a movie the first time you watch it.
It is. It's a one of a kind for sure, for a few reasons.
Yeah. Fascinating movie. More times you watch it, you'll notice something different, and so yeah. Anyway, there you go. 1 fucking hour, barely did it on cruising. I definitely could have gone on and on and on and been sprayed bottled to infinity, but I definitely enjoyed it. Self-spray time. So guys, we didn't really. I mean, we do have next week's solidified, right? I mean, we can announce this.
Yeah,
right?
we have two grim bummer movies in a row here. And I will. You know what I'll say is this is well, we're going to get into it, but that's a great achievement. Our next film next week. It's fun. Just immediately, I started thinking about how the film succeeds, because I think it knew what it wanted to do. This next film, and it really succeeded in executing. And I think the Cruisin' wasn't really sure-footed in what it quite wanted to get done. But the next one is also by an incredible director. We're going from one great director to another. You want to spill the beans? I
think this will be the perfect Valentine's Day episode for 1 fucking hour. We're going to be looking at another director double dip. We did his film.
Beeps.
With
Andy Kaufman.
No,
we're not.
No. We did all that jazz, and now next week we'll be looking at Bob Fosse's Star 80, about based on the murder of
Star 80,
Dorothy Stratton. Unbelievable film.
Editing heaven.
Yeah,
for starters. And one of the great performances. See, sorry, I'm really unfairly comparing Cruisin' to Star 80, but the performance, is Paul Schneider. That is a powerhouse. I can't wait.
A masterclass.
It's yeah. Also, it's the first film about the 70s 2 years after the 70s ended, and I love that. I mean, there's going to be so much fun, interesting stuff to talk about. And it's an enormous bummer. And I've seen people walk out of the room, when I'm watching it. They just, it's really upsetting. And it's a true story.
Yes, it is, and it is a grim film, but it's a
story.
Yeah, but it's a underappreciated movie. I think across the board.
I think so.
Yeah,
let's try to pump it up. Because it's by one of the He didn't make a lot of movies, but every one of his movies is awesome. You know,
Yeah,
like
agreed.
It's just like, I mean, again, you make a lot more movies, you probably have some clunkers, but that guy was about as good as anyone ever. Bob Fosse, and he didn't start as a director. Like he's this other thing. He was a choreographer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so impressed. And I just carve me out some time to talk about the editing.
Oh, we will. Oh, the editing and the sound and the performances. There's a lot to get into. It kind of ticks all the check marks of the things we like to talk about with great movies here on One Fucking Hour. So,
exactly.
So all right. So next week, Star 80, One Fucking Hour on Star 80, and guys, the show wouldn't be complete without your moment of Zen, which I'm going to be playing right after this. But we will catch you again next week, and have a great rest of your weekend, everybody, and see you later. All right, bye-bye.
This Thursday at 9, watch for the SCTV premiere of The Cruisin' Gourmet.
Okay, how you doing? Today the gourmet is going to teach you how to stuff a turkey, okay? What you do first of all is tenderize it with this.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.